Skip Carey screaming, "Braves win! Braves win!
Braves win! Well, I was just dancing and crying and celebrating with my
Yes,
son.
at an annual holiday Honda 10 event.
Good afternoon. It's good to see all of you this afternoon. I don't even know if it stopped raining. Once you get in here, you don't even know what's going on, do you? But I want to thank y'all. I know we have a lot of huge hearts in this room, and y'all each bring very important issues for us to hear today. Before we get started, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you this day and ask us to calm down. We're at one of those points where there's so much going on, it's often hard to pause and reflect and listen. So we ask you for that today, that you help everyone in this room have open hearts and open ears to listen to the work that you would have us do. In your precious name we pray. Amen. So I would like to call today's meeting of the House Appropriations Human Resources Subcommittee together for us to begin hearing testimony for the 2019 budget. And we're going to get started right this minute. Is there anything from the committee? Does anyone have anything to say before we get started? If not, let's begin with the Georgia Department of Veterans Services. Commissioner Roby, it's good to see you. Glad you're here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the subcommittee. It's an honor and pleasure for us to be with you this afternoon to briefly discuss the Governor's recommended FY 2019 appropriation for the Georgia Department of Veterans Service. We're using pages 91 through 97 of the House tracking document. With me this afternoon are my two assistant commissioners, Dan Holt sitting to my right, George Canavaggio sitting out here in the audience, our Director of Operations, Mr. Mark Bannister, our Women's Veterans Program Director, Ms. Vita Brooks, our Training Manager, Ms. Ramona Roper, and our Budget Specialist who keeps us all straight, Ms. April Dodgen. We've prepared a briefing handout, which you should have before you, that addresses the funding items in the recommended budget. To conserve time, we will not go into detail regarding the across-the-board statewide adjustments in our programs. However, we have provided these items for your information. We will focus on the three increases in the recommended budget for our agency. Before we get into specifics of the FY 2019 recommended budget for the Georgia Department of Veterans Service, I would like to take a moment to address some pertinent information related to our department's mission depicted on slides number 2 through 4. In the federal fiscal year 2016, Georgia was ranked 9th in the nation for population of veteran residents with 700,000 known veterans living here and potentially eligible to receive earned benefits from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, or the VA. At the same time, our state was ranked 5th in the amount of non-taxable income dollars in VA compensation and pension earned by veterans from their military service coming into the state's economy. These non-taxable VA doctors amounted to over $3.5 billion being spent in the state and contributing to economic growth for the state, sales tax revenue for local governments in the state of Georgia, and property taxes for local governments, etc. Of that $3.5 billion in VA payments, the Atlanta VA Regional Office has indicated 70%, or $2.5 billion, has been handled by the Georgia Department of Veterans Service as part of our ongoing claims and appeals efforts to support our state's veterans to receive all their earned benefits related to their military service for which they are eligible. When you look at that amount of tax-exempt veterans benefits monies brought into Georgia by our department and compare it to the $7.3 million appropriated to support the effort, there is a return of investment amounting to 342 to 1. We currently operate 50 field offices across the state, from Lafayette in the northwest to St. Mary's in the southeast. In addition, we maintain 25 satellite offices, mostly in rural areas of the state, where we serve veterans at times ranging from 1 day per week to 1 day per quarter, depending on the workload needs of that area. Our field operations are divided into 2 regions for North and South Georgia. Our North Georgia Regional Director is based in Athens and co-located our Athens field office in the VA's community clinic. Our South Georgia Regional Director is based in Warner Robins and co-located at our Warner Robins field office, co-located in the state's Veterans Education and Career Transition Resource Center called the Vector. These regional directors provide assistance and guidance through their offices related to assisting veterans in processing and prosecuting their claims with the VA. In the Atlanta VA Regional Office, we operate an appeals division to assist and support veterans who are appealing the adverse VA decisions about their claims for earned benefits. We provide all these claims and appeals service to Georgia's veterans at no cost to them. A saying worth remembering related to VA benefits is, no benefit are obtained automatically. They must be applied for in order to receive them. Our workload statistics for our field offices show we are seeing an average of 36 offices per day compared to an expected number of 28 per day. There is a wide range between the average number of office visits occurring in most populated areas of the state compared to the more rural locations. We monitor the workload closely, and when vacancies occur due to retirements or employees finding better paying jobs, we check closely to ensure staffing levels are consistent with the needs at each location and make adjustments where needed. We thank you for your support of the Women's Veterans Office and our training initiatives approved last year. Both of these new functions are operating well, and the interactions between our department and the Veterans Treatment Courts to support recruiting and retraining mentors are being jointly developed with the Council of Accountability Court Judges. At the end of December 2017, we had 368 veteran patients at our two state veterans war homes located in Augusta and Milledgeville, as shown on slide number 3. 50 of these patients were service-connected disabled veterans whose total cost of care is paid for by the VA. The other 318 were regular veteran patients whose cost of care was split approximately 50-50 between the VA and the state and the daily fees paid by the veteran patients. The renovation and construction project at the home in Milledgeville to create a subacute rehabilitation therapy unit is underway using the $6 million in funds generated by the state's general obligation bonds that were approved by the General Assembly in the 2017 legislative session. The matching federal VA monies from the VA grant number 2 are awaiting the final approval by the VA Secretary, and we hope to see these monies shortly. The remaining balance of the VA funding through grant number 3 will be coming to us no later than federal fiscal year 2019, although there is a possibility they may come sooner if other states competing for these monies have not gotten their state funds approved. Also, at the end of December 2017, we had 4,422 veterans and immediate family members incurred at our two state veteran cemeteries in Glenville and Milledgeville, as shown on slide number 4. We are currently averaging a total of around 30 interments each month for both facilities. The Milledgeville Cemetery is currently undergoing its Phase 3 expansion that will be open for use this summer. Our total state and federal funding for the Georgia Department of Veterans Services is over $40 million, as depicted on slide number 5 of the briefing. The first two physical programs, Departmental Administration and the Georgia Veterans Memorial Cemetery at slides 6 and 7, contain only the statewide across-the-board adjustments. The third physical program at slide number 8, Georgia War Veterans Nursing Home, contains 2 increases. The first, at tracking number 48.3.1, provides an increase of $236,964 for the home in Augusta to support the employer share of the teacher's retirement system. This home is operated for the Georgia Department of Veterans Service by Augusta University and serves as a teaching laboratory in geriatric medicine for interns, residents, and other medical professionals receiving education and training at the school. The second increase at 48.3.2 is for $24,986 to support the employer's share of health insurance for the Board of Regents of the university system. The next increase is in our Veterans Benefits Program on slide number 9 at 48.4.3 in the amount of $278,468. These funds will support the opening of 2 new two-person field office in Columbia County, expanding the field office at the Atlanta VA Medical Center by an additional 2 field service officers, and expanding by 1 the field office in Columbus, Muskogee County. The population in Greater Augusta area is growing rapidly and will continue to increase with the establishment of the Army's Cybersecurity Center at Fort Gordon, along with consolidation of other federal cybersecurity activities of the U.S. Homeland Security Department and other federal agencies at that location. Our field office at the Veterans Home in Augusta serves Augusta, Richmond County, and surrounding counties, and is one of our busier offices with 3 service officers providing assistance to veterans in that community. The workload at that location is growing, and with the population of the area expanding, we need to provide more service to the veterans living there. We also have a 2-person office in the Augusta VA Medical Center. However, that office only serves veteran patients at that medical facility. We currently have 3 service officers located at the Atlanta VA Medical Center. Their workload has increased dramatically over the past 2 years to veterans population growth in the Atlanta area, seeking services, and the fact our appeals division is no longer able to provide assistance with filing claims to veterans because of the appellant workload and increased requirements of the VA to ensure adequate representation for veterans appealing VA decisions is provided at all times. Our largest field office is located in Columbus with 4 field service officers. The growth of that area over the past 5 years related to the influx of active duty personnel from Fort Knox and the growth in the number of veterans calling the area home has continued to make this office our busiest. The addition of the 5th service officer will allow us to ensure timely services provided to our veterans. It will also allow us to do more outreach to Fort Benning to work with soldiers leaving the Army through discharges and retirements. Depending on how this model works, we are looking to expand it to other military installations in the state, such as Fort Stewart, Fort Gordon, and Robins Air Force Base. Slide number 10 depicts the impact of these additions to our programs, which totals $520,374. Slide 11 to 13 provides our mission, our vision, and our values. Thank you for allowing us to make this presentation to you. Madam Chair and subcommittee members, we thank you for your support. And at this time, we'll answer any questions that you may have.
Representative Oliver.
Thank you, sir. I'm aware that sometimes you co-locate some of your service providers in other offices. For the expansion of service in Columbia County, are you co-locating, are you building a new building, or are the costs for Columbia only personnel?
No, ma'am, what we will do, ma'am, is that will be a separate office. We will work with state properties here, and Mark Bannister, our operations director, will work closely with them, and they will go and try to obtain established building that's already there.
So you haven't made a decision yet whether it'll be a lease or a building or
Right.
a co-location?
Right. No, ma'am, we won't be building. No, ma'am, it'll be a lease.
And it may or may not be co-located with somebody else?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
If I may, Madam Chairman, one other question.
Certainly.
You have suggesting a statistic of a return on investment, and I was curious how that was measured. Is that measured in terms of, this is, I believe, I was looking for what page, I believe that's on page 2, slide 2. How's that measured? In terms of winning cases, in terms of obtaining benefits, or in terms of another measurement?
Well, ma'am, I'm gonna let Dan answer it because he's my administrative expert, but it's based on what the VA has rated the veteran with his or her amount of their disability.
But I'm trying to figure out how you measure your specific involvement in the disability. Forgive me.
I think I killed it. What we did, the thing that you've got to keep in mind is the VA compensation and pension benefits, the $2.5 billion that the VA says that were handled by our department. Those are ongoing benefits, and they are paid out on a continuing basis as long as the veteran remains alive to receive them. So what we did was we took that $2.5 billion number and we divided it by the appropriation for our Veterans Benefits Field Operations and Appeals function. And that's how we got the number 342.
But the fact that a veteran is getting the benefits that he or she's entitled to over a certain number of years does or does not tell me whether or not you had an active role in that case, and that's what I'm confused about.
Well, the active role number comes from the VA saying that 70% of the $3.5 billion that's coming into the state was handled by our department, and that's $2.5 billion.
Okay, by the State Department.
Yes, ma'am.
I see. And if it was handled in 2005 successfully to provide the service, you're still counting the dollars
Yes, ma'am.
in 2018.
Right. It's the only measurement that we have to try and determine that because of the way the system works.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Well, I don't see any. Thank you for your informed presentation. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Madam
it.
Chair.
We're grateful
Thank
for
you
the
all.
work that you are doing on
Yes, ma'am.
behalf of so many very special men and women who have served our country.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, would like to hear from Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, please. Director Sean Casey.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak with you today. We're going to start on page 51, and we're going to start right in the middle of the page. Last time I was here, you allowed me to present on fiscal year, amended year 2018. We shared an overview of the organization, the program, some of our success stories. Obviously, today we'll be talking about Governor's recommended fiscal year 2019. In the middle of the page, on page 51, line 28.21. Actually, before I get into it, the big picture, if we look at this, is our budget is pretty much exactly flat. But I do want to start on line 28.21 with the BEP, the Business Enterprise Program, where you see a change, a decrease of $141. If we go next, and if I'm going too fast, please slow me down. I had an afternoon cup of coffee. But on line 28.22 for admin, a change of decrease $3,299, almost $3,300. Next on line 28.23 for DAS, Disability Adjudication Services, that is nothing, or no change, I should say. That receives, it is a program entirely federally funded. I do want to make a quick comment regarding this program, that it is entirely federally funded. There is a chance that the government does shut down again at midnight tomorrow, February 8th. But before walking in here, I saw some headlines. Looks like they might come to an agreement. I don't want to speak for anyone up north. But if they do not come to an agreement, working with our CFO, Minerva Nixon, and her team, we kind of prepared for this, planned for this going back to fall last year. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And if they do not come to agreement and do shut down, we will have funds in reserve to sustain them for 10 business days, for 2 weeks. And then after that, some hard decisions would have to be made. Next, we're going to turn the page and go to page 52. And at the top, at line 28.24, is Georgia Industries for the Blind. Again, they are entirely self-sustaining and do not receive any state funds. Next, we'll go down to line 28.25, which is our VR program, and you see a net decrease of $4,550. And then finally, line 28.26 reflects the transfer of $1.6 million from GVRA to the Augusta Hospital that shares the property at Roosevelt Warm Springs down in Meriwether County. And again, I want to publicly thank David Mork and his team with Augusta Hospital there. We have an excellent relationship with them, and the easiest way to say it is they're a very good neighbor. They're a great neighbor. And that is the budget. Now, I do want to quickly kind of maybe beat you to the punch. May get the question next or offline, and that is, because I know I can tell you I've received it hundreds of times over the last year, year and a half, is where are we with our federal funds and being able to draw down money? Basically, the amount of federal funds we are able to draw down, if you look at the bottom right-hand side, is just about $110 million. We received, you look at the top left, roughly $21.5 million. We were able to draw down $80 million, which means roughly we are sending back to the feds that goes to states around the country $30 million. The next question I always receive is, well, what would it take to obtain that $30 million? And that answer is 8.2. But I just wanted to spend a quick minute on this slide and we can move on. Second last slide, I just wanted to give some more into the weeds information. We had been talking about turnover, one of our weaknesses at GVRA, and we looked into the weeds and broke it down. The largest turnover you see is actually in admin, which would be our 200 Piedmont building, kitty corner across the street. But the big number that sticks out to me is the 23% with our vocational rehabilitation. And that's going to be our counselors, counselors' assistants, employment specialists, the troops who are on the front line, working the caseload, working hand in hand with the client's parents, so on and so forth. But here is the breakdown of our turnover over the last year. And then finally, I always take this opportunity to thank my coworkers, and I don't think I do a good enough job thanking some of our partners. So very quickly, I want to thank the Georgia Department of Education and also our friends within Georgia Department of Education, Department of Special Education, for their support. With the passage of WIOA, Workforce and Innovation Act, a couple years ago, we are federally mandated to work with clients as young as 14. And we have formed an excellent relationship with DOE. And that relationship has gotten so strong that we are now sharing data, they are sharing data with us, with their students, so our clients can give have the most up-to-date, in-depth information on our clients, again, as young as 14, and we can give them the best track forward. I also want to thank, through our Georgia Industries for the Blind, the partnerships they have developed through the Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation, Governor's Office Highway Safety. They've been doing a great job signing contracts with them. And speaking of education, I want to thank Georgia Tech down the street. They have an amazing program called AMAC, or Tools for Life. And what they do, we've actually had a couple board meetings in the last 12 months with them. They are doing cutting-edge technology for individuals with disability. What they allow us to do is bring in a client and go into their offices and play with the toys. And then they help design it specifically for that individual. And then when it's ready to go, we pay for that product so that client can go out into back to school or into the workforce and use that product to achieve that degree, diploma, maintain that job, get that paycheck. And then finally, I want to thank personally Ken Heiss, leader within our Employment Services Department. Through his leadership, we have formed a partnership with the U.S. Business Leadership Network, basically allowing us to partner up with major corporations here throughout the state of Georgia, Coca-Cola, Federal Reserve, Georgia Power, Georgia Pacific, SunTrust, and again, remind them that the services we provide for them, helping train a client, helping get a client a job, helping a client maintain the job, that we do it for free. We never send them an invoice. And so that is my presentation. I wanted to keep it short, right to the point, allow my fellow peers who are presenting later as much time as they need. But again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here, and always humbly ask for your continued support, and I'll answer any questions that the committee may have.
Are there any questions? Not seeing any lights. I think you've informed us well so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee.
And thank you again for all the work that vocational rehab is doing. It's such an important part of helping people with disabilities go beyond their greatest expectations. Thank you. Okay, next, behavioral health and developmental disabilities. And we have a great team up here to follow that up as well. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. We are ready whenever you are. Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you our budget for fiscal year 19 this afternoon. We have quite a bit of information to share. With your permission, I'll go through as quickly as I can with not rushing our complex budget, but allow time because I anticipate there may be some questions about some of the information that we're presenting. Of course, I want to begin, as I always do, with a note of gratitude. You've been extremely supportive of DBHDD and the tremendous goals that we have, and we are grateful, and that work continues. We're also grateful for the partnership. I want to thank the House Budget Office and Leo for partnering with us as we try to gather information and make sense of the information together as we move forward. So thank you to Leo for working with my team members, Jeff Miner, Mary Price, and Chris Hamilton, who are here with me today. So thank you. Okay. Have 6 elements of the presentation this afternoon, and you see them there on the slide. We begin, as we always do, with an update on the ADA settlement agreement. And the reason we do this, it's a major priority for the department, but also it really has driven our budget requests over the last 7 years. So many of the generous allocations you've made to us have been in service of fulfilling this very comprehensive agreement. I'm pleased to let you know that a majority of the items in the agreement have in fact been successfully completed, and I think you're aware that in 2016 we negotiated an extension agreement. There are 3 major categories that remain: transition of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities from the hospital to the community, housing supports for people with serious mental illness in the community, and then additional oversight that's needed for medically fragile and behaviorally fragile and complex individuals that are in the community. We have a number of very specific targets to meet in the agreement. Those are aggressive targets, and we are scheduled to end June 30th of 2018. You'll hear a little bit about our efforts working diligently to achieve that goal. Just a reminder of your support. Since the signing of the agreement, you all have allocated $235 million into our behavioral health and developmental disabilities services over the past 8 years. And for that, we are grateful and pleased to tell you about the transformation of our system that has evolved from that. So with that, give you that context, and then the context of our total agency budget. For your purposes, we're pages 18 through 20 in your tracking document. Last time we met, gave you briefly just an overview of DBHDD's entire budget. I have 3 quick snapshot slides here that give you 3 different ways of looking at our total budget, because I think it's important to understand that we have a large, complex set of programs that are both in hospitals and community, and different members are interested in different aspects of that. So on each slide, I just have one basic point to make. This first slide, the most important thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was we have our administrative costs broken out here. Those represent 3.2 1.2% of the total budget, which is almost $1.2 billion. Want to make note of this because it's important for us to let you know that we make every effort for as many dollars as possible to move into direct services for the people we serve. And so the team works really hard to keep our administrative costs to a minimum. So you see that broken out here. The next slide. This is a trend line of hospital versus community spending. And want to show this because we think it's good representation of what the intent of the settlement agreement was. It was to slow the entry into state hospitals for people that could be served in the community. So in fact, you see a leveling off of the hospital funding, and you see the increases that you have provided really have built an array of comprehensive community services. You do not see a drop-off, a complete drop-off of hospital spending because, as you're well aware, while we still have 5 state hospitals, the importance of quality and safety in those hospitals remains critical. Next slide. Thanks. And then this probably is the most detailed slide, once again to show you the diversity and complexity of our total budget and all of the different program areas that we serve. This presents them whether or not they're in the hospital or the community. These are the total amount of state and federal dollars that are allocated in each program area. So of course we'd be happy to share any more, but just wanted to provide that general overview of our budget. Okay, now we'll move on to our budget priorities for fiscal year 19. These should be relatively familiar to you. We've talked about them quite a bit. Our mission and our vision is ensuring easy access to high quality care. And we have 2 elements of this goal that you will see in our budget priorities. The first is crisis services statewide. There's certainly a lot of interest in that area. The second is the continuation of waivers for transitioning individuals, both from the planning list and from our hospitals. The second budget priority for fiscal year 19 is forensic services. Just a reminder what forensic services are and DBHDD's role in this. Forensic individuals are those individuals that are basically involved with the court due to accusation of criminal activity. They might be involved with us in a community or hospital setting. You'll hear a little bit more about our priority there. And then finally, as you've heard, as a priority for the settlement agreement, housing services specifically for individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. So we'd like to share more about that. As you've heard from others, these are our statewide budget adjustments, the annual fluctuations in administrative costs. I won't spend any time on those so that we can get to more specific programmatic priorities. Please. Okay, so here you see our total requests for essentially $20.6 million in the state funds here. So I'll talk about these items 2 by 2 because you can see the categories. The first 2 are adult developmental disabilities. The second 2 are adult forensic services, and the final 2 are in adult mental health. So let me talk about adult developmental disabilities. This is one of the areas of the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice that people are familiar with, and there's been a familiar cycle to your support with us in that a waiver, just as a reminder, a waiver is the funding mechanism that allows an individual to live successfully in the community with a disability. It tailors it to their individual needs and provides supports and services that are matched to the individual's needs. So each year, you've allocated waivers, and then generally how this has appeared in the budget is you provide 6 months of funding in the year that you see it, and then you annualize it in the following year. So the first 2 items here are 6 months of funding for 125 new waivers. That's for FY 2019, which then the total would be annualized next year. The second item you see is 6 months. There was 6 months funding in 2018, which you're now seeing the annualized amount for 2019. And then just a reminder, so where do those individuals come from? Essentially 2 places. They either come from the state hospital, and those are our most fragile folks that have been in the institution, or they may come from the planning list. Waivers allow individuals to move into a life in the community either way. So those are the adult DD budget items. Next are the forensic services. And as I mentioned, we have forensic services both in our hospital and in our community. This is the one area of hospital growth is forensic individuals who come to the attention of DBHDD. And so that first item that you see there, the 40-bed unit, is for the construction of an actual unit at Georgia Regional Hospital here in Atlanta. And the $2.2 million that you see here is for funding for April to June for construction. This would be annualized to deliver services in that 40-bed unit in the hospital in the future. The second item, the Forensic Community Integrated Home, that is what you might imagine that it would be. When individuals still on forensic status are released to the community, there are many times where the judge might ask the state to continue to keep an eye on that individual as they transition to the community. So we have community integration homes that are staffed by DBHDD that allow individuals to transition successfully into the community. That home is targeted for 6 beds, anticipated in the metro Atlanta area. The final 2 items are both in our adult mental health budget. The first one is a behavioral health crisis center, and that's actually that $3 million figure you see represents half-year funding. And if you remember, Behavioral Health Crisis Center is really our highest order crisis unit in the community, and it is our most comprehensive one. And it consists of 3 elements, a crisis stabilization unit, temporary observation, where people can walk in and be evaluated and diverted potentially somewhere else, and then a crisis service center. This is really our 24/7 most comprehensive drop-off and service center. And you have been generous in supporting those, and we've been building those. This is a model we developed about 4 years ago and have been building those throughout the state. So you see half-year funding there. Final item under adult mental health is for supported housing, and the $5.7 million figure you see there is to provide supports for about 700 individuals to live successfully in the community. What many of you have become familiar with is that for people with serious and persistent mental illness, housing is essential to their recovery. So we provide rental and other supports that allow that person to live successfully in the community. That's been a big part of the settlement agreement. So that's the total of our DBHDD budget changes there. Okay, next, I think a budget piece that many of us are quite proud of. As you all know, Governor Deal appointed a Commission on Children's Behavioral Health, and I was very proud to serve as the co-chair with Katie Childers, the governor's policy director on health. And we had a prestigious and thoughtful group that met. We had a couple of impressive champions in the front row at all of our meetings, including your chair here. And that group was challenged with improving mental health services for children in the state of Georgia by maximizing existing resources and enhancing crisis coordination throughout the continuum of care. After thoughtful review of many recommendations and input throughout the state, the Commission provided input to the governor, and the following items that you will now see were items that were placed into DBHDD's budget in service of the Mental Health Commission recommendations. You see the total of $20.6 million. It's hard for me to see that and hide my smile. This is the first major investment we've seen in children's mental health in decades that I've been at work. So I think this really is an exciting opportunity. A really nice thing about this, as you look at the total picture, is that it really is an investment in the full continuum for children's mental health. There are items related to prevention, education, access, treatment, crisis services, and then services helping youth, young adults in particular, to move beyond our traditional service system. So I'm proud of that. I'm going to make mention of just a few of these and share a little bit more information. I'll take a moment to tell you a little bit about those highest ticket items, particularly crisis services, because that was such a priority, and many of you have been familiar with the unmet need in the state. And you've heard that in the form of children who are in crisis being stuck somewhere we don't want them to be. And so these crisis services are what really allow us to enhance and expand the training and capacity and capability for community service providers to respond to youth in crisis. Very specifically, one particular challenge for the state has been youth who have behavioral health issues and developmental disabilities issues, and the system has not been well prepared to serve those youth in crisis. So a good portion of this money really enhances our ability to effectively and appropriately respond to those youth. The next item I want to say a word about is the Georgia Apex project. I think many of you recognize this as school-based mental health. This was the #1 recommendation from informers around the state to expand what has been a very successful program. And you see we've got $4.2 million allocated there. I can tell you currently this is a very well-received program because it's school-based, so kids are getting help where they need it, and it's really incentivizing partnerships between behavioral health providers and schools. And that's something that really wasn't in place statewide for quite some time. Apex currently is in 79 counties in Georgia. There are 30 providers that are covering 289 schools and have reached over 3,200 students. So this extra $4 million we anticipate will allow us to extend to 13 contracts and serving almost 100 more schools in the coming year. So this is really a great enhancement. You also see note of telemedicine. As we know, we've had rural challenges, and so some infrastructure and one-time funding to make telemedicine available is a great support. We anticipate that these funds could touch 42 providers with infrastructure and ongoing ability to reach youth and families through telemedicine. And then also want to say a word about the opioid abuse and education and suicide prevention, because oftentimes these are the things I get asked most about. Are we doing enough? Can we do more? And the answer is we need to do more. But this is a great step in the direction of getting the word out through education and outreach. And in suicide prevention, we have both education and outreach and also an enhancement of the Georgia Crisis and Access Line. And if you're not familiar with it, I do want to remind you that Georgia has a 1-800 Crisis and Access Line that you can call for information, but 24/7 you can call in crisis to get assistance. And this enhances GCAL's ability to respond, particularly at peak hours and on the weekends. So I'll move forward, and if there are more questions about that, because I do want to take a moment to tell you about the autism initiative, which has been another area of great interest. Just a reminder, the autism benefit is new in Georgia. Everyone recognized it as a challenge and as an issue for us. There were an estimated 17,000 children with autism that were enrolled in Medicaid in Georgia. And every state, Georgia, like every state, received guidance from the CMS, from the feds, to begin developing a more comprehensive service array to address youth with autism. So Georgia set about that work. You've heard a little bit about this. I have to give credit to my partners, Commissioner Berry at the Department of Community Health. They're responsible really for helping to drive the benefit package, the full range of assessment and treatment services. Public health, certainly now led by Dr. O'Neill, that team is really responsible for early intervention. And where that puts DBHTD is really in the lead on developing crisis services specifically for autism. So let me show you what that looks like within the budget. Okay, so you see two items here. That first one, child and adolescent, DD, in the amount of about $5.9 million, crisis services for autism. There are 3 kinds of crisis services. And I think even if you don't understand autism or our service system, you might understand this. The 3 service line items are, first, mobile crisis, right? So if you imagine yourself knowing a person with autism and having an urgent need, the first thing you might want to do is be able to pick up the phone and call and have someone come to you. That's what mobile crisis does. The second thing is a crisis stabilization unit specifically designed to serve youth with autism. So if mobile crisis came and determined that they could not resolve the problem and the issue with the family right there, they might suggest that the youth actually go to a crisis unit where they could be treated and stabilized. That's a short-term setting. If that is, that might be successful, but if more additional help is needed, the third line item is crisis respite, and that would be where an acute situation has been stabilized, but more help is needed for the person, for the youth to return home to the family. So that's what the crisis service line looks like for DBHDD. And again, just to be clear, we did not have this expertise. We actually have 4 child and adolescent crisis units in the state. But having overseen one of those in the community, I know that the team there was not equipped to serve youth with autism. They want to, but they were not equipped to. So these funds really are a critical enhancement. And what the expectation is with the CSU is actually the building of a 10-bed unit that will be attached to one of the current units. Right, so there's already a facility there and some expertise that's there, but we'll expand what's there and have more expertise that's specifically focused on youth with autism. And then you see a final yes item there, which is around the addition of positions, more capacity for telehealth for youth with autism, and then finally 3 positions, 1 at the state office and 2 intensive service coordinators to really assist families that have complex needs around autism. Okay, so that takes you to our slide that gives you the total of agency budget requests and in perspective of the overall DBHDD agency budget. I'll make quick mention of our capital budget. Just a reminder that we do retain hospitals, and given their age and their needs at the facility at each of those 5 state hospitals, we often have urgent and then long-term requests. So those capital needs continue. And again, I could take questions about that. I want to say one final word about the future. About our challenges, and I've presented some of these to you before. There's one that I do want to make sure that I make mention of, because we talk a lot about crisis and crisis services, but I do also get the question about what can we do to prevent crises, and I think it is an important question. The settlement agreement with the Department of Justice has been focused on the deep end. We have built a tremendous amount of services on the deep end. We also think that there's an important need to build core outpatient basic services. Ultimately, the hope is that we can prevent some of these crises in the future. So we have many needs, but that is one that I wanted to make sure that I imparted to you today. So that's a lot of information that I've shared. Madam Chair, I'd be more than happy to take questions about any of those items.
So everybody take a deep breath. That was a lot. That was great. Appreciate you and the incredible work y'all are doing, and doing quickly, as this money seems to be available right now to address a very important but urgent need. Representative Oliver. That may be a hot mic. Do you want to try 2 and just see? And just try it? It's all of them on that side. Thank you. Let's try. Let's see if we can move this microphone towards you. There's a bit of a buzz. Try 3. I don't know if we can get this one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're also very happy about the children's mental health expansion. I'd like to direct your attention to 15.8.10 in relation to supportive employment, and I'm trying to remember the updates we did last year in trying to maximize federal match funds by sending some of these slots through either vocational rehabilitation or the technical schools.
Mm-hmm.
Does this, how did that work out? And does this money include any of that shared funding that could be matched more extensively?
Thank you for the question and the interest in what really is a rich area for growth for us, I think. So these state funds targeted towards 500 young adults.
Are they matched in any way by federal funds?
Chris, can you help me answer that?
Certainly. This is targeted toward 500 young adults.
Right.
Based on a monthly rate of $510.
Yeah.
These are
She's asking about the federal match, I think.
It's specialized for educational components, as well as a little bit of supporting components. It's not really related to what rehab is.
Yeah, so we do have a partnership with Voc Rehab, but I just wanted to confirm that it's not related to this particular.
So we're not, this money is not matched by federal funds.
No.
And in relation to the movement of money we did last year in order for an attempt to get federal match, I think we sent it to vocational rehabilitation. How did that work out?
I think, yes, I can report that the partnership is going well. We'd have to give you a little more detail about the funds and the actual utilization, and we'd be happy to do that.
I'd appreciate an update on that because it matters as to, obviously, if we can get a federal match. If we could use some of that money for towards the 8.2 money that vocational rehabilitation asked for the federal match. That's what but y'all can follow up with me on that.
Absolutely.
Because I know we moved money in order to take advantage of that match, and I just want to know if it worked.
Yes. Okay, so thank you. The team's just making sure I'm getting the detail right. The DD Council is an attached agency of ours, and so the funds came through there. And again, I do want to report, and if Director Casey is still in the room, we're very pleased with the partnership there. They've been very collaborative in working towards making sure our folks have a high priority with Voc Rehab.
And your report that you made, which was very, very helpful and in-depth about your plan to really prioritize and categorize the waivers, you'll be giving us a report on how that's implemented and whether the estimates seem to be working consistent with how you have diagnosed your long waiting list.
I'm sorry, I think I missed the first part of your question. It's in reference to our 5-year
Yes.
Our planning list report to you all,
Right.
which we're very happy to bring forward. So we would love to have further dialogue.
Right, and further information on how it's being implemented will come as you move forward.
Yes, we'd love to. We'll need an engaged commitment and further discussion about priorities with all of you. The needs there are great, but we're very happy to finally be in view of the total picture. So thank you.
Sorry. Rosalo, I think the question on supported employment could be answered by GVRA. I'm sorry they've already left today. I don't know if anyone will be here tomorrow, but we'll make sure to get those answers. They are very engaged. They've been in some conversations with me particularly and Leo about some of the things that are coming that are on the horizon and the near horizon. So,
Yeah.
right. Okay. Next, Representative Harden.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, you got adult addictive, and under that you've got $90 million, and the children's, I guess, addictive, opioid abuse, education and outreach, $790,000. Now, what I'm wondering, opioid abuse is, of course, our biggest problem right now as far as accidental death and problems in society in general. there is some new federal money
Yes.
coming. Does this include, is new federal money included in this, or is this just what you normally generate from that program, for that program?
So DBHDD was the recipient last year of what's called the State Targeted Response, $12 million in year one. Chris, is that calculated in the, I don't believe it is. Yeah. Oh, yes. I think he was looking at the, representative was looking at the.
Well, I don't
The overall agency
don't
budget.
need any numbers. I just wondered if you were going to get some.
We had received
an infusion from.
Yeah, and I'm happy to tell you we've already dispersed a great deal of that money, and one of the reasons that we did that, and it's out in community providers all around the state who are providing an array of treatment, prevention, and recovery-oriented services. One of the reasons we hustled to get those contracts out on the ground is we are in hopes that Georgia would receive year 2 funding. It's not clear yet whether or not that'll come from the feds, but we made a point of moving quickly. We had a lot of providers who were at the ready, so a lot of that money is in service right now.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Representative Benton, just a minute, we're going to get your microphone. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have several questions I would like to ask. Some of it going back to your presentation for the supplemental budget and then on up to right now. When we talked about the supplemental budget, I asked you approximately how many people were on the waiting list, and you said about 8,000.
Correct.
I think it's about 8,600.
Yes.
And we see that we are going to fund an additional 125. I just, a novice at this, I am, but I have to ask this question: why do we have a waiting list? Because if you're at 6,000, you're never going to get any service. And if you're at number 1, if you have people coming in that have a greater need than you do, they're going to supplant you as number 1. So why do we have a waiting list?
So I really appreciate the question.
I hope
in Georgia, like in every state, the need for developmental disability waivers outstrips the service capacity. And really, it's a matter of what investment we could make in order to begin addressing the needs of individuals on the planning list.
Well, if you look at the cost of a NOW or a comp waiver, could you give me just a ballpark figure on what the average NOW waiver is and the average comp waiver is? So, and in this document, are we tied by anything that in law that we have or federal law that says we have to give one NOW for one comp, or can we give all NOW, or can we in order to try to get some of those out of the way? But have y'all ever thought about doing away with a list and dividing the state up and maybe into congressional districts and allotting those things out that way? That way the people are only competing against people in their district instead of somebody over the whole state for a waiver. Does that make sense?
It does, and you raise a really interesting point, and I think it's the reason you all asked us for a 5-year plan. That that planning list makes us all very uncomfortable, right? Those of us that would like to see people with intellectual and developmental disabilities served in their community. We do not have the funds allocated in order to serve these individuals with complex needs. So our report on the 5-year plan that was referenced earlier was DBHDD's approach to how we could, in partnership with you, work towards a year-by-year plan, and which individuals would you take and how would you go about that? I will say, to your point, we did used to allocate regionally. And our assessment over really looking at that deeply over the last 12 months was that what we found was we really needed to prioritize the most urgent region from a state lens. And so it is a statewide look at priorities. But that report and how we go about that is really what we hope is the beginning of dialogue about how to address this unmet need.
Okay. Madam Chair, could I ask a couple more questions?
Certainly.
All right. In the court settlement, you said in the supplemental hearing that there were about, I think, 190 patients left in the hospital.
Approximately.
In the court settlement, we're supposed to move all of those out of the hospital. Is that correct?
The language of the original agreement said that.
Hold on. Let me finish. My question is, what's going to happen to these people?
So the language in the agreement, as the extension agreement says, by June 30th of 2018, every individual must be in the setting that's most appropriate to their needs. So we have every intention of continuing to move individuals. We will not move 190 people by June 30th. So we will continue. We have a new transition process where services are enhanced in preparation, and then after individuals move to the community, we will keep moving every individual as soon as their individual needs can be met in the community.
Will there be some individuals that will not be able to be moved? In other words, they are at a point to where moving them out into the community would not be in their best interest or the community's interest.
By June 30th of 2018, we may not have the community placement for them, but it will be our effort to continue to move every individual into the setting where they can thrive.
Just two other questions, and I know you're tired of hearing me, but
That's okay.
You asked for money to build a new crisis center. Where is that going to be built?
So that seems to be a very, very popular question and a lot of interest around this. Current plan is for that crisis center to go into Macon.
Okay. All right. And my last question, I noticed in one of the lines that I think it was 15.2.1 where y'all had to pay into the teacher retirement system. Who in your department qualifies to be in teacher retirement?
That's it, just the child and adolescent. Yeah. So in our child and adolescent crisis units, we actually have teachers, and so it's a very small number of
Thank you very
employees.
much for answering my question.
Thank you for your interest. Really appreciate it.
Representative Henson.
Thank you. My concern is with autism. Of course, the numbers have increased greatly over the years. And as a result of that, we have young adults, not young anymore, they're in their 50s, who currently live with their parents, who are in their 70s or 80s. What are we looking at in terms of the state taking care of these individuals when the parents are no longer there? Because a lot of them need to have somebody around 24/7.
Yeah, thank you. You raise another important area of need in the state. We do have some ability through our community waiver services to provide some behavior supports or other family supports for individuals that might be in need. But I think you see the gap that occurs for not having had autism services in place for many years. So we are challenged, but we do have some services that can provide some supports for individuals that are eligible.
I hope we do, because I know that number's growing. I've been here for a long time. I've dealt with autism even longer than that. My ex-husband's son is autistic and in his 50s. Fortunately, he's been able to take care of him. But for the other people, other folks out there who are not able to, that's a grave concern. And I mean, these articles have been in the AJC going back into the 80s. And I think that it's something we need to begin looking at sooner rather than later, because we're going to be there and it's going to happen.
Thank you. We welcome the opportunity. This is the important thing about opening up the benefit, in the autism benefit in the state of Georgia, because a really critical thing that it starts to do is build a workforce that can get paid to do the work in Georgia. So we're just at the beginning of having the benefit in the state, but I think you'll find as we have more trained and certified members in the workforce, other needs are going to emerge. We agree.
Could you explain what do you mean by more folks in the workforce? Who are you referring to?
So autism, folks who can deliver behavior therapies and are certified. Within autism, you have to be certified in order to provide kind of higher order analysis and skill building for individuals with autism. It's a complex disease, and so prior to the benefit being opened, our workforce, and it still is right now, quite limited. So now the building of the benefit and the enhancement of capacity in the state really enables us to get more individuals trained and qualified in order to provide adequate services to individuals throughout the full ASD range. More to come. Thanks for your interest.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to piggyback off Representative Bennett's question. The fragile, in the settlement, you saying in June of 2018 we should be, all of those patients should be in a community setting.
They should be in the setting that's most appropriate to meet their needs.
So what, kind of explain that. So
yeah.
If there's a fragile person in that's, and I'm familiar with Gracewood, where a lot of those beds are. So there are some that are up in age.
Yes.
And fragilely not able to, I'm trying to envision, what does that mean?
Yeah, so we actually have had hundreds of fragile individuals move from our hospitals into the community into specialized residences that are adapted and provided additional support, nursing and medical oversight, and very specialized residential assistance through the comp waiver. So we've been able to do that. We can only do that at a pace that providers are ready to provide that kind of service in the community, and that they have medical services in the community that could be responsive to them. So we continue to move forward, but that's why I'm saying we will not move an individual if we cannot find a community setting where they can live safely and successfully.
So will you be moving patients like that away from the family? Would there be any consideration about distance?
So I'm so glad you mentioned it, because a really important thing we do when we're working with every single individual, person by person, they have choice in where they can move. And for most of them, their families are helping guide that decision about choice, about where in the state they would like to live. And so we have 30 individuals right now, for example, who we're in partnership with the families trying to find just the right placement, just the right residential setting, with the right provider in the right location. We'll only do it one by one.
Is there a home in our region, in Augusta, that we can visit and see that?
I would be very happy. Beth Shaw is the director of our Office of Transitions, and she'd be more than happy to take you. There are many homes in the Augusta region, and I think you'd be amazed at what they've been able to accomplish. Still, we can only move one by one to meet each individual's needs, but we'd be more than happy to take you to visit some of our individuals that have transitioned successfully.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, checking right now. I don't see any other questions. I know this is challenging to take on a whole new or many new projects like you're about to, but I want you to know we have faith in you to do that and to always know you can ask more. I don't mean for more money, I mean ask more questions for how and what to do. I value the understanding that expertise is needed to be added, as well as workforce built up and capacity, not only for those you serve, but for those who will serve. So I thank you for your wisdom as you carefully move through this, and I remain very excited and hopeful for the changes that are about to take place and taking place earlier and earlier. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You all have been incredibly supportive to us. Please know that we share, I think, a passion about really vulnerable individuals throughout the state, and we aim to do Georgia proud. So thank you for your support.
Thank you so much. And next, last but not least, of course, is the Department of Human Services. I believe Commissioner Crittenden and Interim Director Virginia Pryor will both be speaking to us. Maybe others too. It's a good team here.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for asking us to come before you to discuss the Governor's budget proposal for fiscal year 2019 for the Department of Human Services. My name is Robin Crittenden. I have with me today members of my leadership team, including Chief of Staff and Chief Financial Officer Geralda Hines and Demetrius Taylor, who is the Deputy Chief Financial Officer. Additionally, Ginger Pryor, Interim Director of our Division of Family and Children's Services, is here today with her leadership team to present the details of the Governor's proposal as it relates to DFACS. Our vision in the Department of Human Services is to build stronger families for a stronger Georgia. We continue to prioritize efficiency, safety for vulnerable Georgians, and outreach across all of our programs. DHS has about $1.6 billion allocated to protect and serve Georgia's vulnerable populations. Accounting for DHS and its attached entities, the total fiscal year 2018 budget allocation is $1.8 billion. Before I discuss some of the details of the Governor's recommendations, I want to express my sincere thanks for the hard work of our entire department. We have seen our state grow and prosper, yet there are those who hit hard times for any number of reasons, and there are those who would attempt to take advantage of the most vulnerable Georgians. That's where our staff comes in. They have done an exemplary job and shown true dedication to the residents in our state. And I want to thank you for supporting the department, them, and our fellow Georgians. We'll be speaking today from pages 48 to 52 in the document. Overall, Governor Deal is requesting $788.6 million in state funds for fiscal year 19. This includes common statewide adjustments and one change that affects the Division of Aging Services. We are restoring $80,000 to the administration budget. These funds were used as matching funds to create service systems for people with dementia and their families. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to present today, and at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Interim Director Pryor to present on the Governor's proposal for DFACS.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Dempsey and members of the committee. As always, it's an honor for me to be here before you today to discuss the governor's budget proposal for fiscal year 2019 for the division. With me today, I have my Chief of Staff, Jeff Lukage, my Chief Financial Officer, Cliff O'Connor, and Legislative Director, Walter Jones. So I will move right in to the governor's proposal and just cover the fact that it annualizes the swap in TANF and state funds and adoption services from the proposal of amended 18, which I've already had the privilege to speak with you about. The FY19 change accounts for about 2.1% growth in the adoptions caseload. The change affecting about $2.7 million is indicated on the first and third lines of the slide. Again, these are not new funds in the budget, but a swap in use of funding sources to make the division better able to support the growth in the adoption caseload, which has grown with our foster care population, as I've mentioned in the past, due to largely the opioid crisis in the state. The governor has also proposed adding $2.25 million as a result of the recommendation by the Governor's Commission on Children's Mental Health. These funds will support 19 care coordinator positions to serve as patient advocates looking out for foster children receiving mental health services. These care coordinators will have more of a mental health and a medical background than our typical case manager and will be better equipped to guide decision making for mental health needs of our children. The governor has also added $288,000 to the division's budget to cover an increase in the personal needs allowance as required by House Bill 206. This change is the first of two installments to cover that increase. On the next slide, as with the amended 18 budget, the governor has added $15 million to the division's budget for fiscal year 19 to address the growing needs of foster care. And then each of the items that follows are continuations of last year's session as the legislature and governor together sought to more closely cover the expenses of various types of foster placements. The governor has proposed increasing the per diem rate for relatives who take care of children in foster care by $2.50, totaling about $7.4 million. He's proposing an identical increase in per diem rates for foster families who work through our private child placing agency partners, and that totals about $2.6 million. Additionally, the governor is proposing an increase in rates to cover administrative costs for group homes and child placing agencies at about by 2.5%, which totals about $1.1 million. So the overall proposed changes total about $28.8 million, and that concludes the governor's proposal for the division. I want to thank you again for your continuous support and for allowing me to come before you today. And with that, Commissioner Crittenden and I would be more than happy to take any questions that you have.
Representative Oliver.
I believe Representative Morris has a question too, but
okay.
I think he's asked me to go first. Last year, the governor announced a $10 a day increase to foster care parents, and $5 was paid. In the current budget, the 19 budget, he's proposing $2.50. What's the answer to the predictable question, where's the rest of the commitment for $10 a day increase?
And so I will also look over to Cliff in case he wants to slap me on the hand if I don't answer the question appropriately. But as allocations to appropriations in other parts of the budget and to support retirement and other priorities across the state, monies had to be directed in other places. What I'm most excited about is that even with other commitments that were made, we were still able to bring forth a part of the dollars, of the $5 for $2.50, which shows the commitment that the governor has to meet that support, even though there are other priorities across the state for the budget.
And I know the governor can't make a commitment for next year.
No, ma'am.
Representative Morris.
If I recall, I heard mention of federal funding to supplement either to hire more people in the call center, and I suppose that's for eligibility. Does that, and if that federal funds supplemental funds for that purpose does not materialize, what would be the plan at that point?
I'm not sure what funding you're referring to. Could you just elaborate some more?
No, I can't, because I was asked that by another individual that was concerned about the call centers and understood there was supposed to be some federal funding that was either going to be asked for or some.
Do you know, because we operate several different call centers that do different things.
I just assumed it was for eligibility.
Well, could we talk to you about that further afterwards?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
that's
thank
fine.
you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate you bringing the materials that you brought forward. I know your challenges are great and growing and hard to keep up with, but I hope that you will persevere. I know that you will, actually. So thank you so very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Before I adjourn, I did want to share two things that are very important, probably to many of you that are still sitting here in the room, two things that are getting ready to happen. Suicide prevention and the numbers of children and young people particularly choosing to take their own life right now is a tragic occurrence in our state right now. Those numbers are growing constantly. There are two things that are getting ready to happen that are pretty important to it. One is going to happen right in this room at 4 o'clock. There will be a movie about a young man from Georgia. It's a true story, and it's produced and developed by a Georgian. It's a pretty profound story. It's called Holding On. It's award-winning already. That production will be playing in here very shortly, and I encourage you, if you have time, to stay and to watch it. I think it will touch all of us. The other is that tomorrow at noon, the GBI will be presenting their PSA on youth suicide prevention, dealing with Georgia's children in crisis, and that will be on the South Steps here tomorrow. Two very important issues that are bringing forward an amazing thing that we all are very concerned about, I know. So I encourage you, if it's not something that you can do, to send someone else, to be watchful, to look for some of the releases about it. I would love to see us get both of these out throughout Georgia as quickly and as much as possible. So with that, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned for today. And we'll be back tomorrow. I know many of you will want to speak. We'll have a sign-up sheet. Maybe about 15 minutes before the meeting begins at 2, and we want to hear from all of you who have such good things to bring forward to us. Have a good evening.